Yes, yes, yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hatman Stripes back, Daily Boxing News, back with another live stream. We'll be talking about this supposedly done deal, as some people are claiming, fight between Anthony Joshua and Luke Partridge. I'm telling you, from the digging I've done, it's not a done deal. It's not signed. In fact, the stuff that's been circulating over the past few days with regards to this fight is nothing new. Turkey Al Sheikh, was it at the Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. rematch? At one of those shows around that time anyway, said that we should expect a big announcement in September. It don't take a rocket scientist to figure out what he was talking about. Right? He was obviously alluding to AJ versus Partridge. So all we're getting now is confirmation that that's what he was alluding to. Anyway, we'll come on to that and various other boxing topics. But before we do, I want to big up Ali early with a super chat. Thank you very much, my brother. Much appreciated. I hope you're good. Shout out to Cropper, Charlene. What's up, Charlene? Kieran, Malcolm, Jimmy, Isaac, Ruz, Mr. Programmer Gamer, Don 1, L360. We got Cool Drems. Is that how to pronounce that name? WizKid. Ricky Baker, President Brush, Jelly Mode, Exactamundo, Hyro Protagonist, Phil Answer, Evil Uncle Phil, big up, Kira Malcolm, Striker in the chat, big up Striker. We got King, Mr. Luca, Abraham, Mario, is it Luzi Baruzzi? Interesting name. Team Batman Boxing, AJ 14, big up. Sazad, the Lost Poet, Yems Boxing Talk, Bally Singh, G-Man in the chat, aka Mr. Liam Goff, big up. Mark Odell, of course, the Truth Channel. All right, we got the whole crew on deck. Big up AS. All right, so let's get into this then. But before we talk about the main topic of the live stream, we are going to start off regarding the Conor Benn situation. Yes, we're going to talk about that right now. For those who are unaware, this is what we're talking about. So at a recent event, I'm going to assume it was a Matchroom event, Conor Benn confronted Duke McKenzie very aggressively. Bear in mind, Duke McKenzie's in his 60s? Or at least late 50s. And here's Conor Benn pointing his finger in Duke McKenzie's face, being very aggressive, talking down to him and all this type of stuff. Because of the fact that Duke McKenzie alluded to the adverse findings in those two Conor Benn tests. He mentioned that. And he also has said that he doesn't think Conor Benn's world class. Just his opinion. And this has prompted a hostile response from Conor Benn when he has seen Duke McKenzie here. He stuck it on him. And what else would you expect from a spoiled rich kid who's used to having everything his own way, who tried to circumvent due process after those adverse findings for two tests at every single turn? The guy acts like everyone's supposed to roll out the red carpet for him, and he's got Eddie Hearn, who grew up in the same circumstances, a rich kid, silver spoon in his mouth, expects everything his own way. When things don't go his way, when people don't roll over for him, he throws his toys out the pram. So when you get two guys like that together, I mean, you can only imagine what type of effery is about to ensue. Right? The level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Entitlement that Conor Benn showed during that whole saga was absolutely breathtaking. Breathtaking. And you see, sometimes you get fighters like Canelo Alvarez who acts entitled. But guess what? Canelo Alvarez, and I'm not making excuses for Canelo's entitled attitude, but that entitled attitude has come as a result of him actually ascending to a certain level in the sport through actually beating people. Once he's ascended to that level, I mean, there was always a certain level of entitlement, but once he's ascended to the world championship level and he's beaten good fighters, great fighters in some cases, yeah, the ego is swollen and he expects the red carpet treatment each and every day in every situation. Conor Benn hasn't achieved a fraction of someone like Canelo. Has Conor Benn even won a British title, a European title? Certainly not a world title. But look at the entitled attitude that this guy walks around with. It's incredible. It is incredible. That can only come from being raised as a spoiled rich kid. To have this type of attitude. Look at him pointing his finger in Duke McKenzie's face as if he's going to chin him. What kind of, I mean, it amazes me actually. It shouldn't amaze me, but somehow it does. That Conor Benn's got so many fans. At that Eubank Jr. rematch, he was cheered. He was cheered into the ring and he was cheered out of the ring. What is going on? When people find Conor Benn to be someone that they want to support after the way he's behaved over the past few years. You know? And even if you don't care about his outside the ring antics, what has he done inside the ring to make you think, oh yeah, this is great. He's one of my favorite fighters. I love this guy. He just beat a zombie in the ring in a rematch. Chris Eubank Jr., a zombie. Eubank Jr. threw something like 75% less punches in the rematch than he did in the first fight. Don't quote me on the exact percentage, but it's a massive amount. 75% less punches. Clearly was weak. Clearly had no energy. Clearly had no strength. And yet Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn are trying to gaslight us into believing that it was just a result of Conor Benn being so much better. Are you having a laugh? You really think we're that stupid to believe that pile of BS? He went in there against the zombie and he came out the other side acting like he'd just become undisputed, and Eddie Hearn was acting like that as well. Ridiculous. You drained a man who may also have had health complications. Perhaps the health complications have arisen because of the fact he's struggling at the weight and have been exacerbated potentially by the rehydration limits for 2 fights. And that's an amazing achievement, is it? And to add insult to injury, the irony of all ironies, Conor Benn, allegedly, isn't keen on fighting Lewis Crocker, the current IBF welterweight champion. Why? Because the IBF have got a rehydration limit on the morning of the fight. Here we have Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn acting like Eubank Jr.'s got nothing to complain about with regards to a rehydration limit. Conor Benn won't even do that himself, allegedly. You couldn't make it up. Duke McKenzie has spoken about Conor Benn on many occasions. I've never heard him say anything disrespectful. He's given his honest opinion. He doesn't think Conor Benn's world class. He wasn't particularly impressed by what he did against Eubank Jr. Why should he be? He fought a zombie. And he said Conor Benn had those 2 adverse findings. Conor Benn apparently is threatening to sue him. But how can you threaten to sue someone when you did have 2 adverse findings? Does this guy not understand the way that defamation actually works? In order to sue someone for defamation, they have to say something that they can't prove to be true. Well, guess what? The adverse findings are a matter of fact. Literally reported by VADA and by the WBC with a clean boxing program. It's not a matter of conjecture. It's not a matter of rumor. It's not a matter of speculation. It happened. So if someone says that there were 2 failed tests for adverse findings or whatever, that happened. Now, if you want to get deep in the weeds with regards to semantics, you can say, okay, well, yeah, that happened, but he cleared his name. He was exonerated by the UK anti-doping panel, right? Well, it wasn't the UK. It wasn't UKAD that exonerated him. It was, I forget what they're called now. But there's a body which UKAD answers to in the UK. And they decided to let Conor Benn off the hook. And because of that, UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control decided to let it go. Eventually. It seems begrudgingly, but they did eventually let it go. But here's the kicker. Conor Benn has never released to the public the reason that he was let off the hook. He could do, but he has refused to disclose on what grounds he was let off the hook. And this guy wants to run around acting like we should all be perfectly, happy accepting that he was totally innocent and he never did anything wrong. Well, if you are totally innocent, Mr. Conor Benn, then show us the grounds upon which you were let off the hook. Show us that it wasn't some kind of weird technicality. Show us it wasn't a jurisdiction thing. Show us. He can show us. All of this talk about, confidentiality, he is at liberty because he's the subject of the investigation. He is at liberty, since the decision has been made, to reveal what happened. Yes, he is. The British Boxing Board of Control confirmed that he is. But he's refusing to do it. All this time later, this guy is refusing to tell us, refusing to disclose how he got off the hook. And then he's angry at someone like Duke McKenzie and various other people, right? This guy is, honestly, Conor Benn is unreal. Unreal. I'll throw it over to the chat. This boy is something else. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, you should not disrespect a 3-weight world champion for their view on you as a fighter and your potential limitations as a fighter. Completely agree with you, Ali. Duke McKenzie wasn't disrespectful towards Conor Benn. He just gave his honest opinion. And Conor Benn's blown up in his face like this. Terribly bad form. He was talking to Duke McKenzie like he was his contemporary or something. Like he was an active fighter. His age mate. No, he's talking to a senior citizen. Like, where's Nigel at? Nigel, you think it's okay for your son to talk to Duke McKenzie like this? Is that how you raise this boy? Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Seriously. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, big up G-Man, much respect to you. Big up Matt Borgerson. He says, what levels of shock would you be in to see Jake Paul stop Anthony Joshua? Would we get the ultimate rage moment from you towards AJ? Ultimate rage moment? No, you wouldn't get the ultimate rage moment. The ultimate rage moment, and I've been raging a bit here at Conor Benn, but the ultimate rage moment that you'll probably ever see from me was the, I say rage, it was a mixture of emotions when Partridge beat Klitschko. I was so happy that Partridge beat Klitschko, but I was also venting my anger and frustration of all those years suffering through Vladimir Klitschko's jab, jab, grab, spongy canvases, slave contracts, dodgy gloves, very murky testing situations, and all. For years and years and years, right? You'll probably never see rage like that again. But if AJ were to get beat by Jake Paul, as I said previously in another video, that would make Anthony Joshua, in my estimation, one of the dumbest people to ever have held the heavyweight title. Because this is not a fight he needs to take. He don't need the money. He don't need to adhere to this 245-pound weight limit. Now, people say he's on weight right now. Well, has he made that weight healthily? Is he strong? Because Jake Paul doesn't believe he is. When they did the face-off the other day, and I'll talk about this in a moment, they did this face-off with Cameron, the rapper, being the mediator, which is weird, but I guess it's, Jake Paul's kind of thing. Jake Paul flat out said, I expect Anthony Joshua, I'm paraphrasing, I expect him to be weakened by this weight restriction. He literally flat out says that he expects him to be weakened by it. We will find out on fight night whether AJ's weakened by it or not, and we'll come on to that fight in a moment. But big up Matt Borgerson. Would I be shocked? Yes, I'd be shocked. But I would just be shaking my head at AJ as, like I say, one of the dumbest people to have ever held a world heavyweight title. Why would you agree to the weight restriction? What for? You're a two-time world heavyweight champion, multi-millionaire. You still got massive fights on the horizon with the likes of Luke Partridge. Like, you don't need to make any concessions at all for Jake Paul. So if he was to go in there and lose, I mean, he's got to be one of the dumbest guys ever. Shout out to Matt. Big up President Brush for the super chat. He says, how would you react in Duke's shoes? How would I react? Honestly speaking, if Conor Benn was on that kind of smoke with me, I'd probably be swinging. All right? Not going to look great on me because I'm like twice his size, right? But yeah, I'll probably be swinging. Truth be told, because that is mad disrespectful. I'll be getting equally disrespectful back to him. Duke McKenzie, of course, a senior citizen in his 60s, smaller than Conor Benn. Duke McKenzie fought in the flyweights and bantamweights and featherweights and stuff like that. He's a small guy. And here we have Conor Benn, way bigger, way younger, all up in his face, pointing his finger. I mean, dear, oh dear. That boy needs a slap. Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. He says, preach. Big up D-Man. He says, controversial take. Jake has done wonders for boxing and might have helped revive boxing. First time seeing AJ have US fans waiting outside. Well, I've always said this, by the way. I've always said that Jake Paul's good for boxing. I've never been one of these people that was trashing misfits. I've never been one of these people that was trashing Jake Paul. Oh, this is terrible. No, I've always, all these years, been bigging up misfits and bigging up Jake Paul for bringing new eyes to the sport. Yeah, because a lot of people who watch misfits or Jake Paul are not boxing fans. And they're going to be turned on to boxing because of Jake Paul, because of KSI, because of misfits. Oh, yes, they are. they're going to want to go down to the local gym and give it a go. You know? So I really don't understand all of this hostility from even some boxers themselves and trainers and journalists and whatever, presenters and also fans towards Misfits and Jake. I don't understand it. It's just bringing more eyes to the sport. Now, is it bringing a lot more casual eyes? Yes. But here's the thing, casuals will find out sooner rather than later that there's a big difference between a Misfits fighter and a real world-level professional boxer. They find that out sooner rather than later. So don't worry about the fact that they think that, you know, there are some misguided souls who follow Misfits that might think, I don't know, KSI could chin Canelo or something insane like that. I can't imagine there are too many of them that would think that, but you know, they'll find out sooner or later. But bottom line is, it's better that they're fighting each other. Let's say these YouTubers, these influencers, it's better that they're fighting each other in boxing than doing it in MMA. It elevates the stature of boxing. It keeps boxing in the public consciousness that when people want to settle their differences, a pair of YouTubers, let's take it to the boxing ring. They're not taking it to the octagon for the most part. They're taking it to the boxing ring. That's good for our sport. So that's always been my view. And yeah, I think Jake Paul has been good for boxing. I know some of the casuals that follow him can be a little intolerable at times. But overall, I think it's been good for boxing. Drawing eyes to the sport. And Misfits even more so. And if AJ messes this up with Jake Paul, then you really don't need to be blaming Jake Paul. You need to be blaming Anthony Joshua. Yeah? This is supposed to be an example of the gulf between a real world level fighter and a have-a-go YouTuber. If AJ can't show that, you need to blame him. Don't be mad at Jake Paul, be mad at Anthony Joshua. But shout out to D-Man for the super chat. Shout out to EJ, he says, hard to put a leash on a dog once you put a crown on his head. It's a great saying. He says, Conor Benn beat the system, but he'll be on his worst behavior for a while. Big up EJ for the super chat. Well, there you go. Because he beat the system, that's precisely why he's on his worst behavior, you know? It's like he's been given carte blanche. Dear, oh dear. Conor Benn really is something else. Big up EJ. Big up Copezilla for the super chat. He says, weight cut, the bright lights, Paul games, AJ may freeze. I don't think AJ's going to freeze unless he gets hit with something and hurt or dropped or whatever the case may be. But we'll come on to what I think about AJ's demeanor in the run-up to this fight in a second. But he looks extremely relaxed. This might be the most relaxed I've seen AJ in the lead up to a fight since his pre-world title days. Yeah, before he fought Charles Martin. This might be the most relaxed I've seen him since then, as you might expect for someone who's about to step in there against a YouTuber. He's supposed to be relaxed, right? Not too relaxed, but he's supposed to be relaxed. So, yeah, I don't see AJ freezing at all. Unless he gets hit with something. Because, you know, AJ is one of these guys, when he does get hit and hurt, that's when he freezes. That's when he goes into his shell. He's one of those kind of guys. Like, Lucian Bute was like that too. Remember Lucian Bute? He was all well and good before he got hit. As soon as he got hit, not only would he get hurt, but he would freeze mentally. Frank Bruno was the same. When Frank Bruno would get hit and hurt, with the exception of that knockdown he suffered in the first round of the first Tyson fight, Frank Bruno would freeze. He couldn't cope. Once he'd been hurt, he'd just freeze. Actually, Jumbo Cummins, he did overcome being hurt in that fight too. But for the most part, when Bruno was hurt, yeah, he'd just freeze mentally. Big up D-Man for the super chat. He says, I agree. Hatman, he is loving it. He was smiling on the boat in Miami. Big up D-Man. Big up Matty Bryant. He says, if he has to fight, do you think Wilder should fight Usyk, Del Boy, or Charlie Z rematch next? Definitely not Charlie Z. The Z Train. Charlie Zelenoff. For those of you who don't know, Charlie Zelenoff, how can we describe him? He's like a mentally ill internet troll who used to claim that he was like a John Fury style, 100-0 in fights, and he'd knocked out God knows how many people. And he famously sucker punched Floyd Mayweather Sr. and then got beaten up by other people in the gym. He also was insulting Deontay Wilder online, and Wilder agreed to meet up with him and have a fight. Wilder apparently made him sign some kind of contract indemnifying Wilder of any damages if Zelenoff got hurt. There's footage of that, and Wilder was actually wearing a right boxing glove on backwards. So the palm of the boxing glove was like at the back of Wilder's fist. It was bizarre. And Wilder was like punching up Zelenoff in the gym. Yeah, so that's Charlie Zelenoff, for those who don't know. A very, very strange character. Is he still around? I don't know. I hope he's getting help. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, I just saw the Duke McKenzie thing. How disrespectful to the Duke of boxing himself. Conor's ego is getting a bit much. Well, Conor's ego, yeah, it's getting more than a bit much, but it's always been a bit much. It's just that it's being revealed now, you know? The entitled rich kid attitude is, excuse the pun here, on roids at this point. Yeah, his ego is on roids. But yeah, shout out to D-Man, shout out to Matty. And to answer Matty's question, yeah, definitely shouldn't be Charlie Z. I think Wilder has to take the Usyk fight. Yeah, he has to take it if he's looking for one last opportunity, if he's looking for money. That's the fight he has to take. Now, I think for his health, he needs to retire. But if he insists on continuing, it's a chance at becoming heavyweight champion all over again, right? It's a chance at making a big payday, and perhaps he's had some financial challenges since splitting up with his missus, who he's got a child with. I'm speculating here, right? So from a financial perspective, he has to take the Usyk fight. That has to be the priority above Del Boy or whoever else. But if the Usyk fight doesn't happen for whatever reason, then yeah, Del Boy is there. There's a potential opportunity for him. Why not? Big up Matt for the super chat. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, Conor Benn is a hot red kid full of aggression and emotions. Yeah, well, he definitely gets his temperament from his dad, without a shadow of a doubt. We've spoken about this in many live streams over the past year or so. We inherit a lot of our character traits from our parents. It's a genetic thing. And again, when you breed animals, you'll find this. And yeah, Conor Benn's character, that aggressive character, comes from his dad. His dad wasn't entitled to the same extent as Conor, or anywhere near that extent, because his dad, of course, came from a normal background, you know, working class upbringing and all that kind of thing. Whereas Conor has been raised with a silver spoon in his mouth. His dad actually had to go through some stuff in life, a lot of stuff, whereas Conor's never been through anything. He's had it all his own way, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would like to be rich so that my kids can grow up with a silver spoon in their mouths, right? But I'm just pointing out some realities here. Yeah, and by the way, not all rich kids behave like this. Some rich kids do have humility and decency. They're not like, totally out of control. But big up Ali for the super chat. I completely agree. You've got a guy who is, by nature, because of his dad, because of the genetics, an aggressive person. You combine that with a privileged, entitled upbringing, or a privileged upbringing, an entitled attitude, and the fact he's also a professional boxer. It's a recipe for what we're seeing here. What kind? No home training. There you go. Exactly, Benjamin. No home training. Who raised this kid? It's a rhetorical question. I know who raised him. His dad and his mum, right? His dad Nigel and his mum. But dear, oh dear, oh dear. What kind of carry-on is this from Conor Benn? Terrible stuff. Danny says, here and now, Luke versus Femi, who wins? I'm going for Luke over Femi. How about you, Danny? You going for Femi? I'm saying here and now, I'm taking Luke over Femi. Although, we'll see how they both look in their comeback fights. I might change my mind. AJ's apparently going to have 2 fights. If he gets past Jake Paul, he's going to have another. If he gets past that, they're looking to have the Partridge fight in September. If he looks really bad, or if he looks really good and Partridge looks really bad in his comeback fight, perhaps I change my mind. But here and now, as things stand at this juncture, I would take Partridge. All right, Danny would take Partridge as well. Evil Uncle Phil says, Femi will always have Fury's number since that sparring session. Jupiter String says, Femi Partridge or Luke Joshua. Femi Partridge doesn't sound as diabolical as Luke Partridge. There's just something about combining those two names, Luke and Partridge, that is just diabolical. It's diabolical. And that's why it's so powerful. Luke Partridge. It totally defuses him. Luke Joshua is like, I don't know. It's weird, but I guess. But Luke Partridge is just crazy. Big up D-Man for the super chat. He says, alternative timeline, Wilder chins Usyk, Joshua fights Wilder and wins. Now that would be bizarre. We've had some bizarre happenings throughout boxing history, particularly in the heavyweight division, but that might top the lot. Wilder chins Usyk, Joshua fights Wilder and wins. That might top the lot. Striker has got Femi over Partridge. Andrew Grimbath says, Tyson Partridge is horrible. No, that really is horrible. Tyson Partridge. Yeah, that's horrible. Exactly that. There you go. It's an instant bad day remedy. Kieran Malcolm says, if Hatman's having a bad day, all he has to do is say Luke Partridge and he'll do a 180. 100% correct. That's a whole fact. That is Conor Benn sticking it on Duke McKenzie in the GIF. Yeah? Some very, very bad behavior from Conor Benn. Being disrespectful towards a senior citizen who was never disrespectful to him. Just gave his opinion on it. And this is what Duke McKenzie gets as a result. And Nigel, if he's got anything about him at all, should be telling his son to apologize. Yeah? Duke's of Nigel's generation. Terrible, terrible form from Conor Benn. Shout out to everyone in the live chat locking in. So let's move on then from the Conor Benn, Duke McKenzie face-off, if we can call it that, and talk about the Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua face-off that happened the other day. This was just uploaded on one of Jake Paul's YouTube channels. I'm going to give you my take. They had Cameron, the rapper, as you can see on screen, who was mediating, doing the job that, let's say, an Adeola Depot normally does in a face-off, or a Johnny Nelson, etc. Anthony Joshua looked the far more relaxed of the two. I'm not saying Jake Paul looked desperately nervous, but he looked far more serious than AJ. AJ was like grinning from ear to ear. He had a very cavalier, laid-back attitude, laughing and smiling. And I don't think it was a put-on. I don't think it was an act from AJ. AJ, to me, genuinely looks like someone, or looks like someone who genuinely feels that he's about to take candy from a baby. As you might expect, right? Former two-time world heavyweight champion. You think about the guys he's been in there with, the guys he's beat, not just the guys he's lost to. There isn't anyone from Dylan White, I'm talking about the versions that AJ fought, there isn't anyone from Dylan White up to Daniel Dubois that AJ fought who I would pick Jake Paul to beat. Not one person. I mean, I'm telling you now, Jake Paul is not beating any of those guys. He ain't beating the Dylan White that AJ fought. He ain't beating the Charles Martin that AJ fought. He ain't beating Klitschko. He ain't beating Molina. He ain't beating Brazil. He ain't beating any of these people, in my opinion. Or even coming close. What, you think he's beating Andy Ruiz? Come on. You think he's beating Joseph? But no. And Anthony Joshua surely thinks that too. Which is why he's all laughing and joking and smiling. Looking like a man who, as I say, believes he's about to take candy from a baby. That was the demeanor of AJ throughout. Jake Paul says that, and again, I'm paraphrasing something I've already mentioned, the 245-pound weight limit, he expects to weaken Anthony Joshua. He said it outright in this face-off. He expects that 245 weight limit to weaken Anthony Joshua, so he won't be as strong. He won't hit quite as hard, and maybe his punch resistance will be worse. He doesn't have great punch resistance to begin with. So Jake Paul's kind of hoping for that, hanging his hat on that. Anthony Joshua doesn't seem bothered by it. I still think that, well, let me put it this way. I don't know whether Anthony Joshua is making that 245 weight limit healthy and strong or not. I don't know. All I'm saying, and all I've said all along, is that if he doesn't, if he has been weakened by it, then he's got to be the biggest fool, or one of the biggest fools to have ever held a heavyweight title. Because why would you make that concession when you don't have to? You don't need this fight. He's got more money than he could ever need already. Why would you make any concessions against the YouTube? It doesn't make sense. Right? AJ obviously sees this as an easy fight, a walk in the park. But if he's underestimated Jake Paul, and he has compromised himself physically agreeing to that weight limit, then it could be one of the biggest disasters in boxing history for a former world champion. We shall see. Now, I've given my prediction on this fight several times over. If there wasn't the addition of the weight limit, I would predict a more comprehensive AJ victory. But as it is, with the weight limit, coming off the longest layoff of AJ's career, devastating knockout defeat, the most devastating defeat of his career, his age, etc., etc. With all that being considered, I'm still expecting Anthony Joshua to win. But I think this fight is going to go rounds. I don't see AJ wiping Jake Paul out in a round or two. I don't see it. I think Jake Paul's going to be on his bike. I think he's going to be skittish. I think he's going to make it difficult for Anthony Joshua to line him up. And so AJ is going to be sticking jabs to Jake Paul's chest, to the head, right hands to the body, trying to minimize any mistakes. And I think it's going to go rounds. I reckon this might go at least 6-7 rounds. Yeah. And, Teddy Atlas, interestingly enough, he normally gives a prediction. Very rarely will he say, I don't know who's going to win. And there's nothing wrong with saying you don't know who's going to win if that's how you genuinely feel. I've said it so many times. I would rather tell you I don't know than just pick someone for the sake of picking someone. I'd rather tell you I don't know who's going to win. Teddy Atlas, this is the first time I've ever seen him say, or I've ever seen him fail to give a concrete prediction. I'm not saying he's never done such a thing before, but it's the first time I've seen him fail to give a concrete prediction on a fight. Because all he's saying about this Jake Paul-AJ fight is that victory for Jake Paul would simply be going rounds or going a distance. He wouldn't have to actually win. All he'd have to do is go rounds or go a distance, and that would be a victory, right? But then he doesn't go on to say who he thinks is actually going to get their hand raised. He's not saying that Jake Paul's going to get his hand raised. He's not saying that AJ is going to get his hand raised. He just keeps reiterating this thing that if Jake Paul goes rounds or lasts the distance, that'll be the same as a victory for him. So he doesn't want to say who he thinks is going to win the fight. And I have to imagine it means it's because he doesn't know who's going to win the fight. He thinks that Jake Paul is really in with a serious chance here of causing a major upset. Anything can happen, but I still find it highly improbable that Jake Paul would win this fight. Even with a compromised version of Anthony Joshua, I find it highly improbable. AJ just knows too much. He's too big. He's seen too many different moves. He's been in there with too many different opponents. He'll be able to read what Jake Paul is doing with his eyes closed. The experience gap is vast. Do you know what I mean? Like, he'll be able to read all the things that Jake Paul's doing and know how to react in the moment. Now, if AJ gets clipped with something big, at that point, all bets are off. Because AJ has shown in the past that he tends to freeze when he gets hurt. Gets confused, right? But up until the moment he gets hurt in a fight, he normally acquits himself relatively well. Yeah? Up until the moment he gets hurt. Against Andy Ruiz, great example, right? In the Andy Ruiz fight, he was landing beautiful punches. I'm talking about the first fight. Knocked Ruiz down in that third round. Okay? Despite looking nervous on his walk to the ring, AJ still knew what to do once the bell sounded. He was still picking the shots. He was still keeping his distance. Do you know what I mean? He knew what to do. It's only after he got hit and hurt that all of a sudden he had no idea what to do in a boxing ring. That's when he was like a lost sheep. But up until that moment, he knew what to do. So I expect the same here against Jake Paul. Unless Jake Paul manages to land something big, Anthony Joshua is going to know what to do to win the fight. And he has the tools and the experience and the strength and everything else, the dimensions to be able to get it done. What say you? Big up D-Man for the super chat. He says, jab will be too much. Can't see it going past 3 rounds. I bet Jake will move a lot. Usyk said AJ has one of the hardest jabs in a recent interview. Big up D-Man. Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. He says, there's going to be a lot of booing on Netflix. Jake will be horrifically negative. That's what I'm expecting for the most part. That is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a skittish. I mean, Jake Paul was skittish against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., for God's sake. A 38-year-old Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. had Jake Paul all skittish. A 60-year-old Mike Tyson had Jake Paul skittish. You seriously think he's going to get in there against AJ and just be completely sure of himself? No, he's going to be skittish too. He's going to be on his bike, moving around. And as Teddy Atlas has alluded to, In Jake Paul's mind, he's probably thinking, look, my goal here is to not get knocked out and last the distance. Because even if I lose on points, my stock still rises because people are expecting me to get knocked out in a round or two. So if I go in there against the former heavyweight, two-time heavyweight champion of the world and go a long way or last the distance, not only have I won financially, but I've won reputationally. It's a win-win. Even in an official defeat, it's a win-win for Jake Paul. If I find an opportunity to land a big shot on his chin, that's a bonus. But my primary goal here is to make sure I don't get knocked out and to just win that moral victory because, like I say, my stock rises from there. People thought I'd get knocked out in a round. I've managed to go 7-8 rounds or, last the distance, which is an 8-round fight. Yeah, I think that's what's in Jake Paul's mind. Actually winning, getting the W in the win column, I think to Jake Paul would be the bonus. Yeah? But going the distance would be good enough. That's my personal opinion. Don't get it twisted. I know he's an ambitious guy. He's young. He's full of testosterone and all that. But I also don't think he's stupid. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's stupid. But I don't think he is. I think he knows what could happen here to him. Big up D-Man for the super chat. He doesn't think it goes past 3 rounds. Says AJ has one of the hardest jabs according to Alexander Usyk. May well have. Big up Ben Odom. Says there's going to be a lot of booing on Netflix. Jake Paul will be horrifically negative. We'll see about the negativity. I'm expecting it too. Big up Ben Odom. Big up Adam for the super chat. He says Bowen Galata versus Ruddock. I've got Ruddock over Galata. Bo versus Ruddock, that's a really interesting fight. Because as I've pointed out many times over the years, Riddick Bowe hardly fought any punches. He hardly fought any punches. Andrew Galata was a decent puncher, but he wasn't a murderous puncher. He wasn't a Razor Ruddock level puncher. Riddick Bowe was hurt by Tyrell Biggs. He was dropped and nearly knocked out in the third Holyfield fight. He was dropped and nearly stopped by Andrew Galata in both fights. Well, in the first fight, he wasn't dropped by headshots. He was only low blows. But in the second fight, he was dropped by headshots. How would Bowe's chin stand up to Razor Ruddock's power? Now, Bowe was a much better boxer than Razor Ruddock. Or should I say, he had a lot more tools in his arsenal offensively than Razor Ruddock. Let me just correct myself. Because Bowe really didn't have a back foot game. Razor Ruddock actually did have a back foot game. Bowe didn't have a back foot game, but he was more two-handed. He had a better jab than Razor Ruddock. He was a better inside fighter. And just had more weapons. But Bowe was very hittable. Didn't have a great defense. Neither guy had a great defense. Neither Razor Ruddock nor Riddick Bowe were good defensively. That's a really interesting fight. I don't see that fight going a distance at all. Razor Ruddock and Riddick Bowe. Someone's getting knocked out. It might be a situation where they did a trilogy and Bowe won the trilogy 2 fights to 1. Something like that. In 3 fights, I could see Razor Ruddock landing a big one on Riddick Bowe and taking him out, So very, very interesting. I've never actually thought about that matchup before. Big up Adam for the super chat. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, Jake will not inflict a glove on Joshua. It will end in a tragedy for him. Mark my words, Jake will be out cold. Well, I do want to just speak to the safety aspect that some people are concerned with. Jake Paul is a young, physically fit athlete who's been participating in professional boxing for several years now, not just in fights, but also in gym and sparring. If people are concerned about Jake Paul's health, Why aren't they concerned about journeymen who get in there against Moses Itauma? Or the journeyman Anthony Joshua was going to fight instead of Jake Paul? You know? I think there's some like selective, can we call it outrage or selective concern? All right? I don't think Jake Paul is in any more danger of being seriously hurt than most of these journeymen who get wheeled out to get in there against top prospects. You know what I mean? Coming out of the Olympics and stuff like that. I don't think he's in any more danger of being seriously hurt than they would be. Generally, when someone gets seriously hurt, it's usually in a long fight, would have taken a sustained beating. Very rarely does someone get seriously hurt by being blasted out in a round or two. Very rarely does that happen. It does happen sometimes. I'm not saying it's never happened. It has happened. But normally, in the vast majority of cases, when a boxer suffers a serious brain injury, it's as a result of a long, drawn-out fight would have taken a sustained beating. That's generally when it tends to happen. 9 times out of 10. So I'm not too worried for Jake Paul. Anything can happen in boxing. There's always the risk of serious injury, even in this fight. I don't see it as being any more risky than if AJ was fighting a journeyman, which he would have been doing had this Jake Paul opportunity not been there. So big up Ali for the super chat. Big up Harold Protagonist. He says, surely even if AJ got clipped, he would be the victor in any sort of fight that ensued. The thing is, AJ is so bad in situations like that. We've seen it time and time again. When he gets clipped and hurt, it just all goes to pot. You know what I mean? AJ just doesn't know instinctively how to cope with adversity in the ring. He just doesn't. The only time he managed to do it really successfully was in that Klitschko fight. But other than that, when AJ gets clipped and hurt, it's all downhill from there. And in that scenario, I have to give Jake Paul a real chance. I have to give him a real chance. If he can manage to land something big and hurt Anthony Joshua, all bets are off. Yeah? I suspect that won't happen, though. I suspect he won't manage to land anything real big. We'll see. I mean, if AJ's reflexes are really shot, Jake Paul does have pretty quick hands and quick feet. If AJ's reflexes are really shot, maybe he does land the punch. But even AJ at 50% of what he used to be should have more than enough to avoid any of those predictable swings from Jake Paul. Even at 50%, he should have more than enough. Jake Paul telegraphs what he does. I mean, look, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. never had great reflexes in his prime. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. has been stopped a bunch of times at lighter weight classes when he was a young man. When he fought Jake Paul, Paul was swinging all kind of huge haymakers at him, and they were pretty fast. Very few of them were landing flush. What does that tell you? That tells you that Jake Paul has got a tell on his right hand. All right? Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was anticipating most of those right hands. And he's only like 6 feet tall. He doesn't have the height and reach to be able to, and he's slow as well. Julio always was slow. But he was able to block or get out of the way of most of those Jake Paul right hands. AJ's 6'6". He's more of an athlete than Chavez Jr. ever was. He's younger. He's better than Chavez Jr. ever was. I'm still sticking with an Anthony Joshua victory. I don't think he'll be particularly troubled at all in the fight. I think Jake Paul's going to be on his bike, and he'll be looking to try and jump in maybe at some point. It all depends on how intimidated he is by AJ's jab and the power shots to the chest and the body. If those shots really intimidate him, then maybe Jake Paul never really takes a big swing. You know, maybe he'll just be too focused on survival. But if those shots I just spoke about aren't intimidating Jake Paul, then maybe he does take a few swings. But I just feel that Anthony Joshua will be able to see him coming and deal with them accordingly. Big up Harold Protagonist. Big up Edward Hogan. He says, I can see Jake Paul doing a prime Mike Tyson and getting really low and coming up and landscaping a big shot. I can't see that at all. But shout out to you for the super chat. Jake Paul doesn't fight like that. He's never fought like that. And I can't imagine going in there against by far the best and most dangerous opponent and biggest opponent he's ever been in there with. He would all of a sudden pull out a Mike Tyson routine in this scenario. That would shock me, right? There are not many things that shock me in boxing, but that would shock me. I mean, it kind of reminds me of when David Haye was gearing up to fight Vladimir Klitschko. And Barry McGuigan suggested that David Haye, in order to win the fight, and I think he actually picked David Haye to win. He said, Haye needs to go in there Mike Tyson style and stick it on Vladimir Klitschko. Get low, duck underneath the shots, and then, you know, come up and attack. And in my prediction for that fight, some of you guys may remember that prediction. It was on the old channel. And that was back in the days when I was still using video clips from fights and whatnot. And I did this like 15 or 20 minute prediction video showing clips from Klitschko fights and David Haye fights. And at the end I said, I think Vladimir Klitschko is going to win the fight on points. Barry McGuigan's prediction, I just thought wasn't based on what anything David Haye had done in the past. David Haye's never fought like that. David Haye at heavyweight was always an ambush fighter. He'd circle around the ring, look to catch you off balance with a right hand. That's it. That was pretty much David Haye's entire game at heavyweight. He barely threw jabs. Circle around the ring, try and get you to fall over your feet, catching up to him, then he's going to step in with a right hand. Klitschko's balance was far too good for that. His jab was far too good for that. He's far too smart and far too cautious for all of that. Which is why I picked Klitschko to win the fight on points. I just could never see David Haye in the biggest fight of his life against the best opponent of his life, switching his whole style up that he'd been using his whole career and, you know, getting underneath Klitschko and doing a Mike Tyson. I just can't see it. Couldn't see it. Can't see it here with Jake Paul, but hey, we'll find out. Yeah? It's a weird world. Like, if we go beyond boxing, it's a weird world. Bizarre stuff happens. So we'll see. Shout out to Edward Hogan for the super chat. He thinks Jake Paul is going to do a Mike Tyson in there. Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. He says, is there any drug testing for this fight? That I'm not aware of. Someone did ask this question on a previous live stream. Or excuse me, yeah, someone asked the question on a previous live stream and I put it to the chat and nobody was able to come up with an answer. I've got no idea if there's PED testing here. No idea. But to that point, Ben Odom, if there isn't PED testing, who would you suspect more of potentially being on something? Or would you suspect both of them? Big up Ben Odom. Big up. And Keto for the super chat. He says, AJ may not have the best chin, but he's been in there with huge punches like Klitschko and Dubois. I don't think Jake's punches will bother him. Now, this is where I would tend to side with Danny. Danny is someone who likes Jake Paul, and he thinks Jake Paul has a much better chance than I do. I'm going to side with Danny in saying that I think Jake Paul does have the power to hurt Anthony Joshua. I think he does. Yeah, AJ's been in there with bigger punches than Jake Paul, no doubt. But you think about the stage of the career that AJ's at now, the potential neurological side effects of the Dubois knockout defeat. You know, fighters' chins very rarely stay the same for their whole career. Their punch resistance very rarely stays the same. It tends to deteriorate over the course of a career, unless they get out relatively early. in their, let's say, late 20s, early 30s. If they continue on into their mid-30s, late 30s, the chin usually deteriorates if they've been hit on it a lot. Now, if you don't get hit on your chin much, you can preserve it up, a bit longer. Eventually, it's going to deteriorate purely because of old age, right? But it's usually a combination of wear and tear and old age that causes that deterioration maybe in your 30s. AJ's chin, and it was never great, I cannot imagine is as good now as it was when he fought Klitschko. If AJ got caught with that same kind of shot now, I think he'd be out cold. All right? And it remains to be seen what neurological effects, what's the word I'm looking for? Residual neurological effects there have been from that Dubois knockout. It remains to be seen. So, yeah, I tend to suspect if Jake Paul lands his best shot on AJ's chin, I think he can hurt him. I think he can hurt him, definitely. So, I would agree with Danny on that one. Oh, yeah. But big up and Keto, we will see. Maybe me and Danny are wrong on that. Yeah, maybe Jake Paul goes in there, lands his best shot, and AJ laughs. We'll see. Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. He says, Crawford made a mistake declining the fight against Jake Paul. According to Ryan Garcia, Crawford was offered the fight. Yeah, I've also heard that. Was it a mistake? Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. Was it a mistake? Terence Crawford made an enormous amount of money against Canelo. And there is potentially a Canelo rematch happening. I would have to disagree with it being a mistake. Because what does he have to gain? Yeah, it's a big payday, but the Canelo rematch is going to be a big payday. And if he were to lose to Canelo, well, he's already got a victory over him, and Canelo is a world-class fighter. If he were to go in there against Jake Paul and any freak thing happens, like he gets a cut and loses somehow by a lucky punch, end of the day, it's a much bigger man. It's a disaster. So, I can see where you're coming from with regards to you think it would be so easy for Crawford. Like, why not do it? It's like taking candy from a baby. The only upside is the money. And I think Terence Crawford, although he does care about money, he's a prize fighter. I don't think he only cares about money. I don't think he cares about money to such an extent that he'd be willing to compromise or potentially compromise his legacy. Going for a what seems like an easy cash grab against the guy who's, 200 pounds plus and a YouTuber. You lose to him, it's a disaster. It's an indelible stain on your resume. So, big up Ben Odom for the super chat. Shout out to everyone locked in listening. Big up Ben Odom. He says it wouldn't involve sanctioning fees. Yeah, and to that, with regards to Terence Crawford's vitriolic attack on Mauricio Sullivan in the WBC, there was some speculation that Dana White and TKO put him up to it. But according to some journalists who say they've talked to Crawford's people behind the scenes, that's not the case. He wasn't put up to it by anyone. In fact, I think they said that Dana White denied it. But then he would, right? He's not going to admit it. The WBC claim that they have some type of fund for fighters in need. And that is inferred as the reason that their sanctioning fees are higher than the other sanctioning bodies. If that's true, have some transparency. Let's see where that money's going and exactly who's being, what's being spent on who. Because if you give us that transparency and it all seems on the up and up, then the WBC have got a much better case, right? But if they're not willing to be that transparent, then you really got to side with Terence Crawford. Why would the WBC be charging more, and it seems to be significantly more, in sanctioning fees than the other three sanctioning bodies? What's that all about? How do they justify it? You didn't hear Crawford getting into it with the IBF or the WBO or the WBA. No, all cool with them. He paid their sanctioning fees, no problem. But he says the WBC sanctioning fees were far too high and he doesn't think they can justify it. But yeah, a fight with Jake Paul, there wouldn't be any sanctioning fees for Terence Crawford. But I think with Crawford, it wasn't just the money, it's also the principle of it. I think he feels offended by the WBC's entitlement. Their entitled attitude. He was talking about how Conor Benn feels entitled. I think Crawford was offended by how entitled the WBC have been behaving with regards to their sanctioning fee. Big up Ben Odom for the super chat every time. Big up Hayden for the super chat. He says, is there anybody in the top 15 or top 10 you'd feel confident for AJ to beat right now? And who should his February fight be against? Okay, that's a good question. So to answer that, let's get the heavyweight rankings up. Let's have a look who's in the top 10 of the four major sanctioning bodies as things stand right now. Just give me a second. I'm going to take a screenshot. I'm on boxingscene.com. They very conveniently have the rankings for all the major sanctioning bodies. Let's take a screenshot real quick and get it up in OBS so we can all take a look at it. Bear with me a second. All right. Let's tap that there. Get this off the screen. And drag these heavyweight rankings in right here. Center that. All right, so let's have a look then. Who would I confidently pick Anthony Joshua to beat in the top 10? First of all, where is Anthony Joshua in the top 10? Is he ranked by any of the major sanctioning bodies in the top 10? Well, he's ranked number 10 by the WBO, 3 by the WBC, which is bizarre. Been out the ring over a year, coming off a knockout defeat. The WBC have got him ranked number 3. Absolutely bizarre. There's that. And you can't even say it's legacy privilege because AJ's never had the WBC belt. Well, maybe it is legacy privilege, even though he hasn't held that belt. They still maybe hold him in high regard because he was a champion with the other sanctioning bodies. Or maybe it's it's a thing about the fact he still makes money as a cash cow or whatever, and they want no sanctioning fees. So give him a high ranking. Maybe he'll be in a big fight and we'll get those sanctioning fees. He isn't ranked at all by the IBF. So, 2 of the sanctioning bodies. In fact, let me have a look here again. All right, AJ's not ranked by the WBA or the IBF. Yeah, not ranked by the IBF. Not ranked by the WBA, but he is ranked by the WBC and WBO. Okay. The WBC ranking is just totally bizarre. The WBO ranking is really generous, putting him in at number 10, but it's not quite so ridiculous as the WBC. So, who would I confidently pick AJ to beat right now? Looking at the IBF rankings, nobody in the IBF top 15 would I confidently pick AJ to beat right now. I would pick him to win some of these fights. I'd pick him over Chisora, but would it be confidently? Not particularly, but I would pick him to beat Chisora. I'd pick him to beat Vianello. I might pick him to beat Michael Hunter at this stage. A Prime Hunter, I wouldn't pick him to beat. If it was this version of AJ versus a Prime Hunter, I'd pick Prime Hunter all day, but Hunter's been looking horrible for a long time now. Ever since he fired Hasim Rahman. Looking at the WBA top 10, if there's any different names in there, might pick AJ over Nelson Heiser, confidently. Makhmudov, that's a shootout. AJ versus Makhmudov. Both guys are vulnerable. That could go either way. I've got no idea who. Is it Kem? I can't even pronounce that surname. The guy ranked number 8 with the WBA. I don't know how to pronounce that, nor do I know how to pronounce number 10. The WBA rankings are so weird because they've got these obscure fighters in there. Lanier Perro and his brother Daniel Perro are both, I'm just going to say it, very limited. Substandard for Cubans. Very substandard. Especially the shorter one. He's really quite, disappointing. So they're two obscure fighters. Then they've got this Kem guy at number 8. Number 10, Gurgen. God, I can't pronounce that surname. Never heard of him. Number 11, Artem. I think I've heard of that Artem guy. Justice Sunni. Joseph Goodall, never heard of him. And bizarrely, the WBA have still got Manuel Char. They've still got Manuel Char in the top 15. What is going on here? I might pick AJ to confidently beat several of the names in the WBA if I actually watch them fight, but I've never seen a lot of these guys fight. They're so obscure. By the way, controversial take, because knockouts cause amnesia. And we'll see how AJ looks against Jake Paul. I would pick AJ to beat Murat Gassiev. Okay, people are saying Gassiev set up the left hook against Pulev beautifully and all this kind of stuff. Gassiev is very limited, folks. Very limited. At heavyweight. He was better at cruiserweight, where his size, he was a decent sized cruiserweight. At heavyweight, he's very limited because he's not fast like most other cruiserweights moving up. So he doesn't have that going for him. It's not like he's elusive. Okay, he can punch, particularly with the left hook, but most heavyweights can punch. I'm sure if he landed a left hook on AJ like he landed on Pulev, it'd be night-night for AJ too, but he's got short arms, he's hittable, and he's hurtable. This is a guy who was hurt by Otto Wallin. So, I'm not saying I would confidently pick AJ over Gassiev, but I would pick him to beat Gassiev. Yeah, even this diminished version of AJ, because I just don't rate Gassiev as a heavyweight at all. I don't think the weight class suits him. I'm now looking at the WBC rankings. Is there anyone else there that I haven't already spoken about? I wouldn't confidently pick AJ over Zhang even now. It's like Zhang's such a massive puncher with both hands. Looking at the WBO, is there anyone in there? Nelson Heiser, maybe? Serenko, I haven't seen much of him. I think I might have seen him fight once. Gustavo Trujillo, no idea who that is. Any idea who Gustavo Trujillo is? Can anyone enlighten me in the chat? Who's Gustavo Trujillo? Some very obscure fighters cropping up in these rankings here. All right, my tab has crashed. Let me just open a new tab. Whenever I try to refresh, it refuses. So better just open a new tab. And now the new tab doesn't want to open up. Come on, Firefox, don't do me like this. There we go. Close these old tabs down. Big up Hayden. Okay, yeah, he's the one who asked about anyone in the top 15. So I've answered that. Big up Hayden. Big up Ben Odom. King KO the Great says AJ KO's Chisora. I think AJ beats Chisora. I don't know whether it would be by KO, but I do think he beats him. Okay, interesting claim from Danny. He says he's heard that AJ sedates himself before fights. Not sure where you've heard that, but I wouldn't be shocked if that's true, because AJ is a very nervous fighter, especially now. Gustavo Trujillo is a bare knuckle boxer. Is that the guy who just beat... he's not the guy that just beat the Russian, is it? I always forget that Russian's name. He fought and lost to Michael Hunter. He lost to Martin Bacoli. He chinned Joe Joyce in about 30 seconds in the amateurs. Why do I always forget his name? I've seen him fight so many times. But he recently got stopped in, I think the fight was in Russia, by an ex-bare knuckle guy. Kuzmin, thank you, Hayden. Yes, Sergey Kuzmin, yes. That Trujillo guy isn't the guy that beat Kuzmin, is it? I'm assuming it's a different former bare knuckle man. People are expecting Partridge to pick one of these obscure names in the heavyweight top 15. It's as if they've been grooming that Nelson Heiser. He's appeared on several Frank Warren shows. It's as if they're grooming him to be a sacrificial lamb for maybe Itama or possibly Partridge as a comeback opponent. You know, like Sefer Safiri and Pianetta style. So maybe it will be Heiser since he's got some kind of association with Queensbury. I don't think he's signed to them, or is he? Indeed, Danny, if Jake Paul does go the distance with AJ, maybe Fury will fight him next, an inverse of the Ngannou saga. Yeah, I wouldn't at all be surprised if Partridge were to fight Jake Paul. You know, Partridge seems to get a kick out of misleading fans and also misleading his rivals. He seems to get a kick out of it. This misdirection where he's like leading you in one direction, making you think he's going to do one thing, then he does the other. Like, he seems to get off on that somehow. Because people right now are kind of gearing up, expecting, all right, AJ gets through, Jake Paul, Partridge gets through a pie, and AJ maybe another pie, then they fight each other in September. But Partridge, yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all if Let's say AJ doesn't look good. It goes the distance. AJ gets the W. And Partridge tries to spin a narrative. Jake Paul won the fight. We all know he won. It was a travesty. It was a miscarriage of justice. I'm going to do the right and righteous thing and fight Jake Paul now rather than AJ because AJ didn't deserve to win the fight. I'm giving Jake Paul the opportunity. That would literally be exactly the kind of thing Partridge would do. Yeah, he enjoys lying, gaslighting, spinning silly narratives. Yes. Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. He says, best Christmas present for me, Luke gets sparked out in his return fight against the nobody. You know, I sound like a broke record here. Anything is possible, particularly in the heavyweight division, but I think Partridge is just too careful and he's too wily a boxing man to ever put himself in a position, given what he's been through in his career to date, to get sparked out by a no-hoper. If that was gonna happen, and it nearly did, it would have happened when he was young. You know, he got felled by that obscure guy, Nevin Pikage, right? He was like where was he from, Albania or Serbia or something, but based in Canada. He had like 3 KOs out of 20 odd fights. Decked Fury heavily. If something like that was going to happen, I think it would have happened early on in his career when he was a bit more gung-ho. This version of Partridge, I mean, you could say it nearly happened against Ngannou, you know, to counter my argument here. And it'd be a good counter. I'm countering myself. Yeah, I guess it could happen, but the feeling in my bones, for whatever it's worth, my intuition is telling me that Partridge won't get sparked out by a no-hoper. We'll see. Sorry to dampen your hopes there, Ben Odom. Maybe you'll be right and I'll be wrong. But I just don't have that feeling in my bones like Partridge is going to get sparked by a nobody. Big up Ben Odom every time. Hands of Steel says, where's Partridge going to fight Paul? He still can't go to America, I think. As far as I'm aware, Partridge can go to America. He just doesn't want to be questioned. If he goes to America, he's going to get questioned. And he doesn't want that to happen. Right? I think for obvious reasons. The same as Kugan Cassius. Kugan Cassius, last I checked, as far as I'm aware, he can go to America. But if he does go, he's going to be questioned, right? He's going to be accosted by the authorities that side, and he's going to be questioned before they let him in. And he don't want to be questioned. Can any of us blame him for not wanting to be questioned? Can we really blame him? Given who they would want to question him about. Okay, thank you. So that guy's name is pronounced Hovhannissian rather than Avanesian. So I'm assuming he's Armenian too? Is Avanesian Armenian? Or is he Romanian? I think his nationality is Russian, but in terms of his ethnicity, he's like Romanian or Armenian or something. Okay, he's Armenian. Yeah, I agree with what other people are saying. the Partridge fight is the one fight in AJ's career that he has, for the most part, always seemed confident about. He didn't, to me, seem particularly confident about the Partridge fight after he lost to Usyk in the second fight, because Partridge, literally a week or so after AJ lost that Usyk rematch, called him out and offered him a title shot, which was just one of the most opportunistic and cynical things Partridge has ever done. Why not call out Usyk? Man's calling out the loser when he's mentally rock bottom. Like, what on earth? See, the problem with Partridge with regards to the AJ fight is that he's kind of painted himself into a corner over the years, hasn't he? He's painted himself into a corner because he's been trashing AJ for years and years. Like, Partridge has trashed AJ more than any other fighter in boxing. There's no fighter that Partridge has spoken more negatively about more consistently than Anthony Joshua. If you've been trashing that guy for all these years and making out as though he is just absolutely garbage, you better beat him when you get in there with him. Do you know what I mean? You better beat him. And you better beat him comfortably. After saying all this for all these years, right? And maybe that's why Partridge has been somewhat reluctant. Because he's really painted himself into a corner with all this AJ trash talk. Big up Lakvinder Singh. He says, Shannon Briggs and Rampage Jackson are a comedy act. They are indeed. Rampage Jackson is a scary guy, bro. That's somebody who you would not want to get into any kind of dispute with. You know, Rampage Jackson just seems like a loose cannon and a scary individual. In fact, he's the only person that I've ever seen Shannon Briggs look a little skittish around. He's the only person ever. He didn't even look that skittish around Mike Tyson, but with Rampage, yeah, Briggs is on his P's and Q's. You know what I mean? I know his ego doesn't like the energy that Rampage puts on him, but yeah. Rampage Jackson is an intimidating character. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. He says, I agree with is it Ardil Ambat? I have an innate feeling Partridge is tremendously washed. His legs look so thin recently. Well, I spoke about this, I forget whether it was on YouTube or on Patreon. But Partridge has had one of the most striking physical deteriorations from an aesthetic point of view that I've ever seen with a fighter. You know, like his body has deteriorated physically from an aesthetic point of view so rapidly. Like, you look at Partridge when he fought the rematch with Wilder, the second fight with Wilder, the shape he was in then, and then compare it to the shape he was in for the third fight and the shape he was in for the two Usyk fights. His body is sagging like a 65-year-old man. He's not even 40. And his body is like all sagging like a sack of spuds. Do you know what I mean? It's one of the most, extreme aesthetic physical deteriorations that I've ever seen with a fighter, a world level fighter at that. But that can be a little misleading because while aesthetically he's deteriorated physically, and obviously performance-wise he's deteriorated some as well, look at the Ngannou fight. He was terrible against Ngannou. He was a damn sight better in the two Usyk fights. Way better, as I expected him to be. There were people, mostly AJ fans, who were trying to push this narrative that the version of Partridge who struggled with Ngannou was a prime Partridge. Like, give it a rest. There were literally people in the comments saying, stop making excuses for Fury. Stop doing it. He struggled with Ngannou because he was never that good to begin with. That was Fury at his best in there. I was like, are you having a laugh? That was clearly not Fury at his best. Okay, now, I expected him to be far better against Usyk, and he was. But aesthetically, he didn't look that much better. He did look a bit better. He was lighter. But he still looked like, I think it was Tim Bradley maybe, who said that Fury looks like 270 pounds of chewed bubble gum. He still looked like 270 pounds of chewed gum in both Usyk fights. But he had the ability to up his game way above what we saw against Ngannou, despite looking physically bad. So it can be a little deceptive, Tyson Fury's aesthetic shape. He's in better shape internally than he seems to be externally. And with regards to his legs looking thin, his legs have always been thin, but they look more thin now because his waist is expanding. You know what I mean? The more his waist expands, the more thin his legs look in contrast. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, he's got a very weird physique, Luke Partridge, and it's getting weirder as he ages. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. Big up D-Man. He says, that is so true. Shannon Briggs was real careful. It was hilarious. I noticed it. Rampage was even making fun of his wife's sister. Damn, see, Rampage is loose with it, bro. He's a volatile guy. That guy, I'm telling you, man, that guy's a powder keg. Rampage is an intimidating guy. He's a loose cannon. He's a loose cannon. They call Shannon Briggs the cannon. Well, Rampage is a loose cannon, bro. Like, he's loose with the mouth. And he's loose, bro. Pause. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. He says, reduction in boar meat. There you go. That's why Luke Partridge doesn't have that same physique that he did in the second Wilder fight. The reduction in boar meat. So let's move on to that anyway. Let's switch up the visuals. I do have visuals regarding that. Riyadh season plans for long-awaited Tyson Fury-Anthony Joshua clash in 2026. Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua has long been one of the biggest fights that could be made in boxing. Now it's as close as it has ever been to finally happening. The Ring has learned that a bout between the former heavyweight champions is planned to headline a Riyadh season card in 2026. Before that can come to fruition though, Fury and Joshua will fight in separate bouts in early 2026. So my main topic for this stream is Anthony Joshua versus Luke Partridge, aka Tyson Fury. And this narrative that some people have been running with, maybe they're overexcited because it's a fight they've been wanting to see for a very long time, that this fight is somehow done or signed. It's not. I saw an interview with Frank Warren just earlier on today, and he indicated that this fight is not done and it's not signed. Okay? So, there are a lot of hurdles to get over, not only in negotiations for this fight to happen, but also by way of several fights that are set to take place, which both fighters are involved in before we can get to them fighting each other. AJ's got this assignment against Jake Paul next week. In fact, why am I saying it's next week? It's this weekend. It's this Friday. It's in a couple of days. So AJ's got this assignment against Jake Paul in a couple of days. Partridge is going to have one comeback fight, and AJ's going to have another comeback fight after he gets past Jake Paul, assuming he does. So there's a lot that needs to happen in the ring and also in the boardroom or in some room somewhere where contracts are signed in order to get this Anthony Joshua Luke Partridge fight over the line. So hold your horses, in the words of Bruiser. Hold your horses, hang about. I said hold your horses, hang about. It's not yet signed. We've been here many times before with this particular fight. Acting like it's a done deal when it's not. And whenever Luke Partridge is involved in anything, right, aside from the comeback fights that both guys have got to get through, whenever Luke Partridge is involved in anything, you know, all bets are off, basically, as far as fights happening with this guy. Dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Luke Partridge's history of pulling out of fights and silly negotiation tactics, etc., etc., etc. Okay, Ardell says, and I'm still saying AJ versus Jake and AJ versus Fury will not happen. Indeed, Danny. Hold your horses and don't push them. Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Tony S. says, Chris Congo got KO'd in the first round versus a 1-win and 18-loss guy on the weekend. Thoughts? Sounds like he's down bad. You know what I mean? Sounds like he's down bad. That sounds horrible. But to Ardell's comment about he doesn't think AJ versus Jake Paul will happen, I suspect it will happen. Obviously, fights can fall through even on the day of the fight. But does Jake Paul really want to pee off Netflix like that? You know? I don't know. I suspect it will go ahead. Ardell says, my dad believes the universe will deliver AJ the victory versus Partridge because it's a guy who's been honest versus a guy who's tried to cheat his way through it. I always felt that with regards to Usyk versus Partridge, that it wasn't just that Usyk was the better fighter. Bear in mind, he was going up against the establishment's favorite at the time in Luke Partridge, the boxing establishment, that is. I just felt that, you know, at the top level, the margins are so small between victory and defeat that the psychological approach of the fighters could make the difference. And I just felt that Partridge's psychological approach ahead of both fights was just totally wrong. That it would backfire on him psychologically, you know? Before the first fight, he literally did everything in his power to try and intimidate Usyk. Yeah? Get under his skin, intimidate him, and all this kind of stuff. Bully him. That's not going to work against a guy like Usyk. All that's going to do is motivate him. Usyk has been beating down bullies his whole fighting life. That's what got him into combat sports in the first place. Because he used to get bullied as a kid. And he wanted to stand up to the bullies. You're not going to intimidate him by trying to bully him. That's what motivates him. Yeah? You're only just going to waste your energy doing all that. if you're going to get Usyk, and it's very hard to get him in any way psychologically, but if you're going to get him, you're better off trying to lull him into a full sense of security with some type of nice guy act. Bullying him is not going to work. You're not going to get it done that way. Partridge tried that and it failed. And Don Charles obviously didn't get the memo because he and his son also tried it and it failed. And Daniel Dubois too with a shove on a football pitch. But yeah, maybe your dad will be right. Maybe the universe will see fit to align things in AJ's favor on the night because of the fact that AJ's been an honest fighter and Partridge hasn't. Maybe. But the thing is, Partridge has beaten a lot of honest fighters because the ability gap between himself and those fighters is just too big. Where the honesty thing comes in is when the ability gap is much, much closer, or the opponent actually has an ability advantage over Partridge. That's when I think, who's been honest and who's been dishonest can make a difference, like a 1 or 2% difference. That's when it can make the difference between winning and losing. So we'll see. If there's only a 1 or 2% difference in the current physical state and ability of AJ and Partridge, maybe that'll turn out to be right. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, will the fight be at Wembley Stadium? It has to happen there. Elsewhere, no one will be interested in watching the fight. Belongs in the UK to the British fans. Well, interestingly enough, Ali, I just saw earlier on today Adam Smith on TalkSport, and he says that there are rumors that the fight could take place in the UK at a specially built arena in Hyde Park. Okay, now the reason for this would be that Wembley Stadium is either, going to be occupied at that time in September, or Wembley Stadium is not big enough to make the fight financially viable. They'd need to sell maybe more tickets to pay the fighters what they want to get paid. Wembley Stadium is like, 80,000 or something, 90,000. Adam Smith was saying that this potential temporary arena or stadium in Hyde Park would hold maybe 110,000. So you're talking about 30,000 fans more. And if they charge enough with regards to the ticket prices, maybe that could make it viable in the UK rather than having it in Saudi Arabia. You'd need to do something like that, okay, in order to get the fighters to agree to have it in the UK, unless they really want to be generous to the fan. Unless it's a Tyson Fury thing, a Luke Partridge thing. We all remember back in the days he said he'd fight AJ for free. He was pacing up and down on those silly talks he used to give in front of all of his gullible fanboys saying, I'll fight AJ for free at Wembley Stadium. Everyone gets in for free. I won't take a purse and he won't take a purse. Yeah, right. You're both taking a purse. AJ would never say something so ridiculous. Only Partridge would come out and lie to the public to that extent. We're going to, I won't take a purse. Me and AJ will fight for free. The fight only happens if AJ agrees to do it for free. What nonsense, man. So yeah, it'll be contingent if it happens in the UK, maybe on erecting a temporary stadium or arena in Hyde Park, which holds upwards of 100,000 people. So let's say 110,000, as Adam Smith said. That's 30,000 more than Wembley can hold. And if they price the tickets high enough, maybe they don't have to go to Saudi with it. But how viable would that be in September? I mean, September, the weather in the UK Can be iffy. I mean, it can be iffy at any time of the year in the UK, but September, I mean, depends on the year. Sometimes Septembers are really nice in the UK. At least it won't be cold. It shouldn't be cold in September, but it's going to be hit and miss as far as the rain. Big up Ali for the super chat. It says, makes sense, great point. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. It says, top 5 irritating, disingenuous characters in boxing in no particular order. Ben, Hearn, Luke, Chisora, Frank Smith. Well, I would swap out Frank Smith for Frank Warren. Frank Warren, of late, over the past few years, hasn't been misbehaving to the same extent that he did several years ago and for the majority of his career. But prior to this Indian summer that Frank Warren's currently having, he was misbehaving all the time. All right, saying all sorts of stuff which was just absolute rubbish. I mean, just look at the years when Partridge was lineal and WBC champion, all the rubbish that Frank Warren was talking. And you go back years and decades prior to that, I mean, Frank Warren was prolific with it. But if you're talking about right now, I'd have to co-sign that list. But other than that, I'd swap out Frank Smith for Frank Warren. Irritating, or maybe you just, okay, sorry. You're saying irritating or disingenuous, or irritating and disingenuous? Because Frank Smith, I can understand you put him in there for being irritating. Not necessarily disingenuous, although he might be to some extent too. Chisora, all right. Some people don't like Chisora. I like him as a character. I wouldn't want to be his friend. I wouldn't want to be around him. But from a distance, I find him very entertaining. Is Chisora disingenuous? I don't find him to be particularly disingenuous. As far as who he says he wants to fight and stuff like that. I'm not saying he's 100% truthful, but not particularly disingenuous, but irritating. I can see how people find him irritating. And as I say, I wouldn't want to be friends with the guy or be around him. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. Shout out to Ali for the super chat as well. Big up Ben Oldham. Coppen says, no chance a temp stadium can be built by September. I'm sure it can be built by September. I'm not sure why you don't think it can be built. I'm sure it can be. So there have been much smaller temporary stadiums that have been built in a far shorter amount of time. There was the temporary stadium that was erected for, I think it was the Usyk-Joshua rematch. That was a temporary stadium. Anyone in the live chat can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe that was a temporary stadium that was erected in a couple of months in Saudi Arabia. But that only held about, I think, 15, 20,000. So much smaller than a Hyde Park one would be. Back in the days when Caesar's Palace in Vegas used to be one of the main boxing venues, they would hold a lot of the fights in their parking lot. Yeah, they had a huge parking lot and they would erect a temporary stadium or arena every single time they had a fight. Yeah, they would erect it in their parking lot. Again, it only held about maybe, 15, 20,000 people. We're talking about much smaller, but they were able to erect that very quickly. Yeah, it didn't take over a year or anything. I mean, Woodden's nowhere near the size of the Hyde Park proposed temporary stadium, but surely they can erect something like that in a year. I'm sure they can. Yeah, RDO confirms that, yeah, AJ Ruiz 2 was the temporary stadium. Or temporary arena, should I say. It's not a stadium, an arena. Danny says, AJ, despite being unconfident in his chin, always had the I never got put out cold, only stopped on my feet crutch. After Dubois laid him out, it's gone. He no longer has any faith in his resistance. Well, you say that, but AJ has been knocked out cold in the gym before. He was knocked out cold in the gym by David Price. In fact, he fell, the way it's been described, in that sparring session against David Price, the exact same way he fell against Daniel Dubois, face first. And he had to be, carried out of the ring, basically, against Price and sparring. So he knows the feeling of being knocked out cold before AJ. It's happened to him before in the David Price sparring session. Ben Odom says, Turkey should give me the contract. I'll put up a makeshift stadium in the UK. I'll fly in a bunch of Ghanaians on a temporary work visa. When is have they still temporarily banned or suspended boxing in Ghana over some fatalities recently? Is that suspension still ongoing? And when is the Nigeria fight card? What date is that this month? It's not this weekend, is it? Surely it's the weekend after. No, the weekend after is going to be Christmas. It must be this weekend then. Or is it after Christmas? I've lost track here. Oh, okay. The box says Aziz versus Richards is in Ghana on Saturday. Oh, okay. So they've resumed boxing in Ghana then, because they suspended it for a minute there. Then he says, Price chinned him. I thought he knocked him down, not out. No, he knocked him out. Price knocked him out. I was told that he knocked him out cold by somebody who says they saw a tape of it. They private messaged me on Facebook many, many years ago. This was long before David Price spoke about it publicly, long before it was in the public discourse. I might have been the first YouTuber to actually talk about it. Right, because this guy who was a trainer, he was an Irish guy that 100% was a trainer. I saw his, Facebook page. I saw him working in the gym with various people in professional boxing gyms. And he messaged me behind the scenes. He said, I've seen a sparring tape of AJ being knocked out cold by David Price. He had to be basically rolled out of the ring. He was out cold. And David Price himself said that AJ was out cold. Now, when we say out cold, he wasn't completely motionless, but he wasn't completely motionless against Daniel Dubois either. Yeah? We count that as out cold. He was more or less out cold against Dubois. Yeah? He was trying to move and, get to his feet against Dubois. He wasn't completely asleep. From what I've been told, that's exactly what it was like when he was chinned by David Price. He was unable to get up unassisted. He had to be rolled out of the ring. Yeah, there's a videotape of it, according to what I was told. He was knocked out. And that would have been before the Olympics? Was it before the Olympics or before the World Championships? When AJ was still an amateur. Oh wow, Freezy McBones is on that card, is he? Yeah, I'm guessing that Freezy has some type of work visa issue with the UK, or maybe leave to remain issue with the UK, because he was signed to Frank Warren. I think he only had 1 or 2 fights for Frank Warren. Then he went missing and re-emerged in Ghana, where he's from. So I have to imagine there's been some kind of like paperwork issue, which is why he's now fighting back in Africa rather than in Britain. That's unfortunate for him. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, also, I don't like 2-fight deals. Should be one and done. The Eubank Benn rematch had no reason to go ahead. Didn't live up to how the first fight was. I completely agree with you. I think 2-fight deals should only happen if it's, let's say, a unification, particularly undisputed. Or when a champion is defending in a voluntary. When he's making a voluntary defense, only the champion, not the challenger too, should have the right to run it back if he loses. That I understand because he's giving the challenger an opportunity he doesn't need to give him in a voluntary defense, right? Those two scenarios aside, there should not be immediate rematches. Yeah, unless it's ordered by a sanctioning body because of something extremely controversial, like a really bad decision or, etc. During the normal course of action, it should only be immediate rematches for voluntary defenses if the champion loses, or unifications, particularly undisputed. Other than that, why are we having these immediate rematches when there's been no controversy? Big up Ali for the super chat. I completely agree with you. That's been my bugbear, particularly with this era of the heavyweight division. Too many damn rematches, or too many damn immediate rematches. Way too many of them. Why is my tab acting like he wants to crash again? What's going on with this tab? Firefox always misbehaving. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, also goes for AJ Partridge. Yeah, it should be a one and done. Should be a one and done. As long as there's no super controversy. Yeah. Here's one thing I will say though. Neither AJ nor Partridge are world champions. So if they were to have an immediate rematch, it's not going to hold up the division. Unless there's some type of like interim belt on the line. Hopefully there isn't. If it's just a normal non-title bout and they have an immediate rematch, it won't irritate me as much as immediate rematches for a world title, because that holds up the division. It creates a backlog of mandatories and whatnot. Yeah. Whereas if it's two guys who are having a non-title fight and they decide to run it back, okay, whatever. I don't particularly like it, but at least you're not holding up the division. King KO the Great says there's a rumor that Joey DeWayco KO'd AJ in sparring before the first Andy Ruiz fight. Yeah, that rumor came out literally before the first Andy Ruiz fight happened. It was swirling around and we were making videos about it in the run-up to that Andy Ruiz fight. The AJ had been knocked out by Joey DeWayco. DeWayco publicly denied it. But you wouldn't expect him to admit it when he was being employed by AJ, would you? You wouldn't expect him to admit it. Maybe he signed an NDA. Apparently some fighters do. Some fighters have their sparring partners sign NDAs to make sure they can't talk about anything that happens in the gym. Coppin says, just announced Trump officially sues the BBC for $5 billion. Okay. I hope it puts the BBC out of business. But, I'm no Trump fan. I mean, you look at some of the stuff Trump is doing and it's very disturbing. What's that social media thing all about? You know? You have to disclose how many years of your social media activity before you're allowed in the United States? What on earth is all that about? But yeah, with regards to the BBC, I hope he is suing him, and I hope it puts him out of business. Obviously, Ben Shalom don't want that, but sorry, Ben. Imagine how messed up that'd be for Ben Shalom, though. If Trump was successful suing the BBC and they had to go bust. Obviously, they're a non-profit making organization, but yeah, imagine if he like sued them out of house and home. And they went bust. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, when will Sky release footage from Joshua Miller? Gloves are off. Will it be released? That's a good question. A lot of people want to see it for the jokes. But who's blocking it? Is Sky blocking it? Is AJ blocking it? Does AJ have the rights to it? Maybe that's why it hasn't been released. I don't know. Big up Ali for the super chat. Apparently, they had some kind of freestyle battle, and AJ's rapping is diabolically bad. Jerome Miller's rapping is not great, but compared to AJ's, it's elite. So, yeah, maybe that's why. Because AJ got totally dismantled. Big up Ali for the super chat. Big up Ben Odom. He says, can't understand why people cannot see through Eddie Hearn. He's a bully and full of BS and contradiction. Jody Marsh, O'Hara Davis, etc. Povetkin, Conor Benn. Are there many people now who can't see through Eddie Hearn? I'm sure there are still plenty, in terms of the matchroom casuals and stuff like that, but maybe it's because I don't really interact with the matchroom casuals that much. I think you come across a lot more casuals on Instagram and Twitter, or X as it's called now, but particularly Instagram. That's like the home of casuals with regards to boxing, right? On YouTube, yeah, you come across casuals, but regular YouTube commenters tend to be more of the hardcore variety. Whereas on Instagram, it is just casual central. Like on the vast majority of Instagram boxing posts I see, you look in the comments and it is just pure casuals. But yeah, what you're saying is absolutely the case. Eddie Hearn is just absolutely full of it. But to his credit, he very often admits that he's full of it. I mean, he's basically outright admitting now that if Devin Haney was still signed to him, he wouldn't be talking about Haney being boring. It'd be a totally different narrative. Not many promoters will admit that, even though it's so obviously true. But Hearn is admitting, oh yeah, if Haney was still signed to me, I wouldn't be calling him boring. It'd be a totally different narrative. And his hypocrisy when it comes to the PED stuff is legendary. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, one thing I can assure you, an interview leading up to Ruiz rematch, AJ said when his career is said and done, he will release it. The interview is on Sky. We'll see whether he sticks to his word. Again, I don't know the legal situation because when AJ departed Sky and joined DAZN, there was certain footage that he had on his YouTube channel which was taken down. Yeah? AJ still owns the rights to all his fights. Yeah? Or most of his fights. But there was some like shoulder programming and stuff like that that used to be on his channel that was on Sky, which was taken down. I remember it very clearly. Yeah? There was some Sky stuff on there that got taken down. I think he took it down rather than it being removed for copyright infringement. Right? I think he agreed to take it down. So, yeah, he might say it gets released, but can he do it legally? Because it was a Sky thing, right? It wasn't a DAZN thing. So, I don't know. We'll see. It was DAZN in the US, but that face-off, but AJ was still on Sky in the UK at that time. Or am I misremembering? Am I misremembering? Was AJ Ruiz on Sky in the UK? Or have I got it totally twisted? Maybe I have. Maybe my memories are failing me here. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, okay, I've read that one. Danny says, DAZN, I'm sure. Okay. If that face-off was on DAZN rather than Sky, if that Jerome Miller face-off with DAZN rather than Sky, then I can only imagine it's AJ blocking it from coming out. And we'll see whether he's true to his word. If that was the case, if it was on DAZN rather than Sky, we'll see whether AJ is true to his word. Because I remember AJ's last fight on Sky in the UK being one of the Usyk fights. Wasn't the first Usyk fight on Sky? Or was it even the second Usyk fight on Sky? Let me look this up now, because I'm sure the first Usyk fight was on Sky. And maybe the rematch too. I think that was the last time AJ fought on Sky in the UK. We'll look it up on BoxRec real quick here. It does tell you the broadcasters. We go back to the first AJ fight event. Yes, that was on Sky. The first Usyk fight was on Sky. And indeed, the second Usyk fight was also on Sky in the UK, but I think DAZN for the rest of the world. That might have been the last time that AJ fought on Sky in the UK. Let me check. Franklin, I'm pretty sure, was on DAZN. Yeah, Franklin was on DAZN. So the last time AJ fought in Sky or on Sky in the UK was the second Usyk fight. The Ruiz fight, I'm checking that now. It was on Sky. So it was Sky. Yeah, because Adam Smith, I remember Adam Smith's voice. Yes, it was on Sky. Yeah, I think it was just DAZN in the US, but it was on Sky in the UK. Yes, it was on Sky. I'm seeing here Sky Box Office. So, yeah, if AJ isn't blocking it, it could be a legal issue with Sky whereby they can't come to an agreement with AJ as far as allowing him to use that footage. It could be either or both. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, Johnny Nelson might have access to the footage, or is his job only to do face-off? Yeah, Johnny Nelson won't own the rights to the footage. So Johnny Nelson won't have any say on whether that footage gets released. He's just a presenter. The rights for that footage will either be with AJ or with Sky. It certainly won't be with Johnny Nelson. Yeah, I remember Adam Smith's voice when AJ got dropped by Ruiz. Oh, it's disaster. It's all gone wrong. I'm like paraphrasing, but you know how Adam Smith is like. When AJ got dropped in the third round. It's disaster for AJ. Oh, Adam Smith hyping up the set. Okay, good question from Amir here. He says, can Fury get under AJ's skin during the build-up? I say it's a good question because is there anything that Fury can say to AJ at this point that he hasn't already said? You know? Like, he said pretty much everything he could say about AJ. He's talked all the trash there is to talk about him. Like, what else is there for Fury to say? So it's a good question. Maybe AJ would be immune to Partridge's trash talk now because he's heard it all before. He's used to that type of energy from Partridge. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, who will do the gloves are off for AJ Fury? Has to be Johnny Nelson. Well, Johnny Nelson, unless he gets a job working for the Zone, and that seems unlikely at this point, all right? And I say it's unlikely because he doesn't appear to have a great relationship with Eddie Hearn these days, and he doesn't have a great relationship with Frank Warren because of comments he's made about both of them. And all these things can be worked out, right? But does Johnny Nelson want to grovel? It will probably take him groveling to make things right with either one of those promoters. And they're going to have a big say over who gets the gig presenting and commentating. So, yeah, I don't see Johnny Nelson doing it. Indeed, as KO Boxing Vibe said there, it'll probably be Ade. But big up Ali for the super chat. Okay, Amir says, because I remember they had a call with Turkey and it seemed Fury got under his skin. Okay. We shall see. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, for the Zone, it has to be the main host, Adeola Depot. I'm sure it will be him or another one of the DAZN hosts. Might even be Dev Sani, right? From the Frank Warren side of things. That's a possibility. Frank Warren has his guys. Could even be Carl Frampton. I think Ade would be the best choice, but all these other guys are possibilities. Just as long as it's not Darren Barker, I could live with most of the other candidates. Okay, someone says AJ hates Dev Sani. He won't allow it. Yeah, Froch would be kind of funny, actually. Big up Ali says, Adeola Depot is a good friend of AJ and close to him. Yes. Uh, maybe Fury will object for that reason. You know? I'm sure Fury's going to have some kind of say over who does the face-off. I don't think it's just going to be down to AJ or whatever. If neither of them object to Adeola Depot, then I'm sure it will probably be Adeola Depot. But you never know. Maybe Fury rejects it and says, Adeola Depot's an AJ friend. I want someone neutral or someone pro-Fury. That's an interesting take. So Harry says, big up Harry for the super chat, gloves are off is being blocked by Eddie Hearn or AJ as Miller questions AJ about TUE exemptions, I'm guessing. That's an interesting take. Very interesting. Because that was right around the time when all this TUE talk was coming up. It was in the run-up to that Ruiz fight when Jarrell Miller was claiming it publicly and when Dylan White was claiming it publicly. The AJ has this TUE thing. So that's a very, very interesting comment there from Harry. Very, very interesting. That sounds like a plausible explanation to me. I don't know whether it's the case, but it sounds very plausible to me. Ali says, big up Ali, what is TUE exemptions? Can you explain, Hatman? Yes, I can. So a TUE is a therapeutic usage exemption. What it is when a fighter goes to their doctor and claims something such as, I've got low testosterone. When I say claims, I'm skeptical when it comes to fighters and their doctors. All right? Call me a cynic. I'm skeptical. When fighters go to their doctors, I'm of the opinion that they can get their doctor to say almost anything. All right? Even if it's not true. That's my opinion. For example, when a fighter says, I'm injured, and they can go to a friendly doctor and get some type of letter from a friendly doctor. Do you know what I mean? I'm skeptical when it comes to things like that. So anyway, basically, with impropriety aside, a therapeutic usage exemption is when a fighter goes to their doctor and gets tested for, let's say, their testosterone levels. And the doctor finds that the testosterone levels are low for their age and whatever, physical condition. The testosterone level's low. The doctor will then recommend a course of testosterone replacement therapy. The fighter then goes to the British Boxing Board of Control or whichever commission is in their particular country, right? And says, look, my doctor says I should be on testosterone replacement therapy. Can I get an exemption for this? And it is alleged that the British Boxing Board of Control allow these things. They allow therapeutic usage exemptions for certain substances such as testosterone. Now, the controversy regarding TUEs is in this idea that the British Board or whoever are allegedly selective with who they allow to have these things. It is alleged, It's never been proven, but I've never seen AJ deny it either. At least not to my satisfaction. It is alleged that AJ has a therapeutic usage exemption with the British Boxing Board of Control for testosterone replacement therapy. Now, if that's true, to me, it's scandalous. Why would an athlete in his 20s, as muscular as AJ is, be allowed to use testosterone? Like, yeah, to me, that should never be allowed. Some people have got naturally higher testosterone levels than others. That's just the cards you're dealt by nature. Yeah? If your testosterone levels are low as a boxer, well, tough luck. Try and change your diet or something. Do you know what I mean? Maybe start eating wild boar. But yeah, big up Ali for the super chat. That is what a TUE is, a therapeutic usage exemption. Indeed, Ben Odom. Miller and White talking about AJ's TUE is like Glaxo accusing Boots of fabricating medication. Yeah, it's the ultimate pot calling the kettle black scenario, isn't it? But that's, of course, why they're doing it, or why they did it. It's like, for example, I don't know how many of you guys follow or have ever watched some of these like ex-gangsters and hitmen who are now YouTubers. Most of them snitched. That's why they're able to be on YouTube and they're not still rotting away in prison. Okay, most of them snitched. And the MO now of most of these ex-gangsters who ratted is to make out as though 99.9% of gangsters are also rats. That's their whole MO now. They want everyone to be a snitch so that their actions were justified. Yeah. And that's what PED cheats are like. They want to make out as though everyone's doing the same thing that they're doing. Now, don't get it twisted. I do think that PED use extends far beyond the people that just get caught. Yeah, I think there are loads of people using PEDs, especially cash cows, that never get caught. But I also would say that I do not believe all of the fighters are using PED. I don't believe that. I think that narrative is being pushed by fighters who have been caught for it. Yeah? They want to believe that there's no one innocent, no one ever wins clean. Everyone's doing it. As a way of justifying their own indiscretions. My thoughts on RTM and Young Spray. I can't watch it, bro. I mean, those guys are from my generation, right, in their 40s, and they act like they're in their teens. I just can't watch it. I can't watch it. Talking over each other and shouting and just a load of nonsense. I can't. Come on, man. I can't watch people my age acting like they're 15-year-olds. I can't do it. 1 second, folks. Encircled says, if AJ chinned Partridge, it would be pure comedy. It would be comedy. It would be. I'm not even going to disagree on that. If AJ chin, and I'm picking Partridge in the fight, but if AJ not just beat Partridge, chinned him, that would be comedy. It would be comedy to see the reaction of the Partridge fanboys. That would be that would be comedy. Danny says AJ is originally from Nigeria, then moved to Watford in secondary school. No, that's not true. AJ did not come from Nigeria in secondary school, no. AJ was born in the UK, as far as I'm aware. He was certainly in UK primary school. He was not in, didn't go to primary school in Nigeria. At least if he did, it was only very briefly, if it happened at all. But yeah, as a young kid, he was growing up in the UK. And indeed, he'd have an accent. AJ certainly, what I will say is that he might have been sent to Nigeria at one point because African parents do that. Yeah, if you're misbehaving, they'll send you back to Africa for a couple years to try and straighten you out before bringing you back. So, for example, um, there was a Nigerian girl that I knew, born in Nigeria, and her younger brothers were born in Nigeria. But when the oldest of her two younger brothers got to secondary school, right, high school, when he was like 12. He started high school at 11, but I think he was about 12 at the time. He started having some issues, and the mum sent him to Nigeria. And I think he spent the rest of his secondary school in Nigeria and then went back to the UK to do college. So it may be possible that AJ was sent to Nigeria for a year or two or something as a young kid, but he certainly, didn't grow up in Nigeria to the age of 14 or 15 and moved to Watford. No, that definitely didn't happen. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was alluding to, Danny. It says Joshua spent some of his early years in Nigeria as a boarding school student, but that's very different. It's exactly what I said. He wasn't born in Nigeria. He was born in the UK. And as I say, it's common for many African kids, not just Nigerian kids, to be sent back to Africa for a couple years if they're misbehaving to try and straighten them out. That's a common thing. But AJ wasn't born in Nigeria, then like lived in Nigeria till he was like 15. Or that definitely didn't happen. He was born in the UK, lived most of his childhood in the UK, but was sent back to Nigeria for a couple years for boarding school. Hence, he returned at age 12. If he returned at age 12, that means he was in the UK originally. KDS says, or KDV, excuse me, says it happened to me. Yeah, happens to a lot of African kids. They get sent back. Sometimes they get tricked. They're told they're going to visit family, and when it's time to go back to the UK, the parents are like, no, you ain't coming. You ain't coming. You ain't coming, son. You're staying right here. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, I'm guessing Ebenezer Tete will bring Lawrence into the right path of becoming world champion. Won't even last a minute. Lawrence should dispatch of Tete very quickly. Tete is a swingers. He's an old Ghanaian cab driving uncle. If he smells blood, he will swing. And it's quite funny watching him swing. But he's so crude. He's so slow. Despite the fact he's quite a big guy, surely Lawrence Okoli can easily line him up for one of them right hands and take him right out. I mean, Fraser Clark stopped him in a round. So yeah, I'd have to concur with you. Okoli's going to take out Tete with no issues at all. Probably early. Will that line him up for a world title shot? Well, not really. It's just a stay busy fight. Okoli does have a pretty high ranking. Last I checked. Let's have a look at those heavyweight rankings again, since we're at it. Where is Okoli with the IBF? Okay, he's 10 with the IBF. Doesn't appear to be ranked at all with the WBA. 1 with the WBC. And that's interesting. No ranking at all with the WBO. I say interesting because he's a Frank Warren fighter. Normally, Frank Warren fighters, by hook or by crook, have got a WBO ranking. Lawrence Okoli doesn't. Maybe it's some type of mix-up because he ranked so highly with the WBC. I'm not so sure. I'm not sure, should I say. KDVS says, happened exactly like that. I cried for weeks. Yeah. So Africans do that a lot. Right? If the kids start misbehaving, they'll send them back to Africa for some real discipline. KDVS says, spent a year in boarding school in Bulawayo. Yeah, they'll send them back to Africa for some real discipline. Or, in the case of what Nigerians were doing, I'm not aware of any other Africans doing this, only Nigerians. We've spoken about this before. They used to farm their kids out. They call it farming. They would farm their kids out. They would send them to the UK to live with like almost surrogate parents and be raised by surrogate parents. It's quite a strange practice. And Adeola Depot was one of those people. Adeola Depot was farmed by his, and he said this in one of his videos, he was farmed out by his family to a white British couple in Brighton when he was a very small child. And so he was raised by this white British couple in Brighton until he was like 12 or something. As I say, Ade did a video about it on his channel. He said when he was reunited with his family, his Nigerian family, at like the age of 12 or whenever it was, he said it was a massive culture shock for him. Do you know what I mean? It was like a massive culture shock. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, Hatman, if you understand what I mean from my comment, I meant, what is Tete going to do for Lawrence? Oh, sorry. Okay. I see what he's saying. Well, yeah, he's not going to do anything for Lawrence as far as advancing him towards a world title. It's not going to help him other than, I mean, can it even shake ring rust? If it's a one-round fight, not really. And he's already ranked #1 with the WBC. He's not going to gain any rankings. You wouldn't have thought beating Ebenezer Tete with the other sanctioning bodies, or he shouldn't. So, yeah, it's not really doing anything to advance him towards a world title. I guess the best he could hope for is that he looks good enough, or that the knockout is devastating enough that it puts pressure on one of the bigger names, or Usyk or whatever, to fight him. That's the best he could hope for from it, but I can't imagine even that will work, because everyone knows who Ebenezer Tete is. Do you know what I mean? Everyone knows he's useless. So, could Tete cause Okolie problems? Not unless Okolie gets injured or something. Like if he injures a hand, especially if it's the right hand, then yeah. But that notwithstanding, I seriously doubt it. I seriously doubt it. I think it goes through Tete like a hot knife through butter. Amir says, do you believe Fury can become skinny and not have fat on him anymore, or is he naturally going to be fat regardless of how many weeks in camp? Well, anyone in the world can become skinny. You just don't eat, right? I've spoken on Patreon many times. I might have mentioned it here on YouTube in previous live streams about the fact that I've done water fasting before. Water fasting is where you just consume nothing but water for a prolonged period of time. I've done it for a week before, several times. Some people will go many weeks or even months water fasting. All right? I'm not recommending it. You guys make up your own mind about it. whether it's safe for you, consult with your health practitioner and all that, right? I just have to put that disclaimer out there so I don't get flagged for medical misinfo or anything. But yeah, anyone can get very low body fat if they just simply don't eat. But you're not going to be able to perform to your optimum in a boxing ring if you're doing a water fast, are you? You're going to be lacking all sorts of nutrients and stuff like that. You're going to lose strength. So can Fury get skinny and in shape while still being strong at this stage of the game? No, he can't. I don't believe he can. I don't think he has the metabolism for it. I don't think he has the genetics for it. At this stage of the game, no. If he wants to get in the ring strong and energetic, he cannot be svelte anymore. He's gone. Railway Boxing fan says, I've done water fasting once and I don't recommend it. I'm not going to recommend it because my body is different from other people's bodies. But all I can tell you is I had fantastic results from water fasting. But on the flip side, I will say the last time I did a water fast, I didn't prepare properly and I started experiencing very disturbing symptoms, right? And when I say I didn't prepare properly, the previous times when I've done water fasts, I was already in ketosis before I started the fast. So I went on a ketogenic diet for about 2 or 3 weeks previously before starting the water fast, meaning my body was using body fat for fuel. It wasn't relying on carbs because I wasn't consuming any carbs. So I was already in that state before starting the water fast. And what the water fast then did is it accelerated the ketosis. Right? It accelerated the fat burning on the water fast. Right? But the last time I did a water fast, I foolishly went from, eating a carb-heavy diet to eating no carbs at all overnight and no food at all overnight. And yeah, my body almost went into shock, actually. I started losing the feeling in my hands and feet. And the loss of feeling in my hands and feet started rising up my legs, rising up my arms. It was very weird symptoms. And that's when I had to stop it because I realized, okay, this is not going well. So all I can tell you is that the next time I do a water fast, I will definitely be getting myself into ketosis first for about 2 weeks or more before embarking on the water fast. That's all I can tell you. Because when the previous times I'd water fasted, I, as I say, got into ketosis long before I started, and I didn't experience any crazy symptoms. There was a little bit of insomnia on night 2 and 3, but for the rest of the fast, I was fine. Yeah, slightly weaker than normal, but after, let's say, day 3 or 4, I was totally fine. I had enough energy to walk around and work and do all the things I needed to do, and I was fine. And I also found that going on those water fasts was a catalyst for more long-term weight loss. Yeah? It like gives you momentum in the weight loss, which gym, in my 40s anyway, alone doesn't really give me. Whereas getting into like deep ketosis on a water fast, even when I start eating again, I maintain a certain level of momentum. Danny says, if you're fasting to lose weight, just eat in a calorie deficit for a few months. Well, yeah, going back to water fasting, you're obviously in a calorie deficit because you're not consuming any calories. But the reason that people like myself like ketogenic diets is because it's easier. Many people find it easier to be in a calorie deficit on a keto diet because when you consume carbs, it spikes your blood sugar, right? And when it spikes your blood sugar, then you go into a blood sugar crash, and that's what makes you feel hungry all the time. When you come off carbs completely, you just generally feel less hungry, and therefore you don't want to consume as many calories. It just makes being in a calorie deficit easier because you just feel less hungry. Ketogenic diet is high in animal fat and protein, right? So you're eating like cheese, high fat cheese, chicken, high fat fish, red meat, stuff like that. I was eating steaks damn near every day and poached eggs, stuff like that. And I was able to, for a long time, just have one meal a day. I'd have like a steak and eggs, and I was doing that for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I'd have some like vegetables with it, like spinach and stuff. I was going months even on that. And I found it easy. Once you get into that groove, I found it easy. But with carbs, I find it so much more difficult to stay in a calorie deficit consuming carbs because they just make you more hungry. Yeah, carbs fill you up during a meal, but as I say, they spike your blood sugar. So you're going to feel more hungry sooner after that meal than you will do when you're in ketosis. Once you're in deep ketosis, you just don't feel hungry often. Yeah? You'll have like that steak and eggs and you'll be like, oh, I'm good for the rest of the day. Because your body is not looking for, your blood sugar doesn't get spiked when you're in a ketogenic diet. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, let's be serious. In 2026, the right fight for Lawrence is the fight with Caballero, WBC interim title on the line. That's the right fight to be made. And that's the fight that Lawrence Okolie says he wants. So we'll see whether it happens. Caballero has got a fight in Germany lined up. I'm not sure when that's going to, is it this year or early next year? He's got a fight in Germany lined up against somebody I've never heard of. If he comes through that, then maybe he'll be mandated to face Lawrence Okolie because, the WBC tend to be very slow in forcing mandatories on their actual champions. Ajit Caballero is only the interim champion. So at some point, Caballero should be mandated, or Usyk should be mandated to fight Caballero, but Caballero himself might be mandated to fight Lawrence Okolie. We'll see. That'd be good. But I would rather, and I'm wishing on a star here, folks, I would rather the WBC mandate Usyk to fight Caballero so we can get rid of this silly Wilder nonsense, right? Mandate Usyk to fight Caballero. Since he's relinquished the WBO rather than fighting Wardley, well, let's get this WBC mandatory on then and have Usyk mandated to fight Caballero. I'd rather see that. But failing that, for sure, I'd like to see Okolie and Caballero fight each other. Ben Odom says, something tells me Usyk will never fight Caballero. Who do I think wins? Garcia Barrios? I think Garcia wins. I think Barrios is just absolutely terrible. Honestly, he's one of the worst world champions I've seen for a long time. Particularly in the lower weight classes. He's terrible, bro. He is terrible. Looked terrible against Pacquiao. Looked terrible in that fight he had on, was it the Jake Paul Mike Tyson undercard? Looked terrible in that. I've never seen him not look terrible. Amir says, what is Fury's ideal weight for the fight against AJ? I reckon low 260s, similar to the first Usyk fight. I don't think it serves Partridge to come in heavy. I know he came in heavy against Wilder and it worked, but AJ's so much better technically than Wilder. He's a much better counterpuncher than Wilder. He's got a better jab than Wilder. I think Partridge would be better off being tricky against AJ. Do you know what I mean? Using his jab, longer arms, frustrating him, tiring him out that way. If he goes full steam ahead, I mean, it might work against AJ, but I think you give AJ more of a chance if Fury tries to go at him. So I'd say low 260s for Partridge. That's what you should be aiming for. Ali says Adelaide is not on the card anymore in Nigeria. Yeah, I heard Frank Warren saying something about that. But he said they're still looking to get an opponent for him, but there was some type of issue with Adelaide's visa or medical, I think it was. Some type of issue. Adelaide hadn't done a medical for Nigeria or something. Lieutenant Frank says failing drug test doesn't seem to matter to a career nowadays. I'm obviously thinking about Garcia, Munguia, White, Partridge, Matias, Conor Benn, etc. You're right indeed. What I will add though is that it doesn't matter as long as you handle it the right way. Conor Benn is an example of how exactly not to handle a positive PED test. That is literally PR 101, do not do, is the way Conor Benn behaved. And in terms of the exact way you should conduct yourself from a PR perspective after a failed PED test, Dylan White is the model example. From a PR perspective, Dylan White knows that. He's failed enough PED tests now, hasn't he, Dylan White? He's got his routine down pat. You fail a test, you just go missing for a few months. Let it all blow over, let someone else get caught. You know, the news, boxing news moves on. You pop back up. Everyone's forgotten about it. Yes, I'm aware of NFL players taking painkiller injections. And of course, yes, boxers do take painkiller injections. It's quite common. They get painkiller injections in their hands. David Haye took painkiller injections for his toe when he fought Klitschko. He had a painkiller injection. So yeah, that's common even in boxing. In fact, I think Haye kind of blamed, because you think about, he had the injection in his toe before he went out to fight Klitschko, a painkiller injection, which would have made his toe or his foot numb. And then he was saying, well, I couldn't feel my foot properly to be able to spring off my back foot to land the right hand. And he got his toe out. You guys remember that? At the post-fight presser, he stood on a table with his toe out. Hay was so desperate in that situation, but it was funny. Danny says David Hay didn't even try to win. No, no, he did try to win, um, but he didn't have the tools to win. He didn't know how to go about winning. You know, he just didn't have the ability. David Hay was doing in the Klitschko fight what he did in all his heavyweight fights. Yeah, or most of his heavyweight fights is circling around the ring, hoping that his opponent would overextend themselves, lean over their front foot, be off balance, trying to reach him, and then he cracks him with a right hand. That is how David Hay attempted to win most of his heavyweight fights. It just so happens that against Klitschko, it was too basic a strategy. Against a guy like Klitschko, at that stage of Klitschko's career, it weren't going to work. You're going to have to hit him in the body, jab with him, be willing to take shots to land your own. So, and that's never been Hay's game. That's not what Hay does. That's not what he does. Now, you could say he didn't gamble. When he was a mile behind on points, you could say he didn't gamble. He wasn't willing to get knocked out trying to win. I'll say that. He wasn't willing to get knocked out trying to win. I'll agree with that. But he tried the usual strategy that he carried out in most of his heavyweight fights. Move around and look to walk someone onto a big shot. But Klitschko was too technically proficient for that. And that's why I picked Klitschko to win the fight on points. Exactly the way the fight played out is exactly how I predicted it. Anyone who remembers my prediction from back in the days, I think I was one of the few people who said that Klitschko would win on points. The vast majority of people were picking either Hay or Klitschko to win by knockout. Why? Because they're both big punchers and both guys didn't have the greatest of chins. But when I weighed it up, I was like, nah, I think it's going the distance and Klitschko wins on points. I think they're going to neutralize each other because they both are going to be wary of each other's power. And Hay is not going to go in there and stick it on Klitschko. He doesn't fight like that as a heavyweight. Look at him again. He didn't go in there and stick it on Valuev. Why would he stick it on Klitschko? Like, Klitschko's way better than Valuev. Okay, Valuev's got a better chin, but he doesn't hit as hard as Klitschko. He's not as fast. He's, doesn't have the kind of balance and the jab or anything. And he didn't stick it on Valuev. Why would he stick it on Klitschko? Yeah? The way he boxed Valuev is exactly how he tried to box Klitschko. Same thing. So if you say he didn't try and win against Klitschko, well, that would be like saying he didn't try and win against Valuev. He did try and win against Valuev, or he did try and win against Klitschko. It's just that he tried to do it the same way he beat Valuev. Circling around and, do you know what I mean? He just couldn't beat him with that strategy. And when that strategy weren't working, did he resign himself to defeat? Maybe. But then in the final round, he landed a big shot on Klitschko and tried to follow it up. You guys remember that? That was the first time David Hay landed a solid shot, was in the 12th. And he tried to go for it, but Klitschko just wrapped him up. So, yeah, he kind of resigned himself to defeat, but he was still trying to implement that strategy of walking you onto a big counter, even in the 12th. All right, peeps, we're going to wrap this one up. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this live stream. Last comment here, Danny says, I just felt he could have done a lot more in the situation under them type of circumstances. He could have taken more risks, yes. Definitely, he could have taken more risks. And he wasn't willing to. For sure, he was not willing to take more risks than he did. I guess he felt he was going to get chinned if he took more risks. So he stayed in his little safety zone. But yeah, big up everyone for joining the conversation. A special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were, and it's a long list this evening, Ali, Matt Borgerson, President Brush, Ben Odom, D-Man, EJ, Cobzilla, Matt Bryant, Danny, Adam Folks, Edward Hogan, Ben Odom I think I've called, and Keto, Hayden, D-Man I think I've said, Ali I've said, also Harry Ramanathan, big up him for a super chat. And as I say, everyone else who joined the conversation, it's been good as always. Until next time, take care, be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.